if you want to retire in America, you need $500,000 or more saved up. Financially, though, because a lot of people are ready financially, they're just not ready kind of confidence-wise. And I found it's more around what's the confidence in the plan as opposed to, am I changing my identity? Is it the right time for me to retire? So I think if you go through and plan your retirement, you'll be a lot more ready to actually retire.
Are you ready for retirement or just hoping for the best? For so many, the 5 years before retirement are the most crucial and the most confusing. You're juggling questions about money, about life, what your next chapter looks like. That's why pre-retirement planning matters. Pre-retirement helps build a strategy that gives you information and control over what comes next. Today, I'm joined by Jeremy Keil, author of Retire Today, to break down the uncertainty. Jeremy designed a 5-step process to help you navigate retirement's questions and decisions. Jeremy, welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
So I want to get to the 5 steps, but first I want to sort of ask you 3 quick questions and get some rapid responses. So how can someone tell if they are truly ready for retirement? I know that's probably the number one question that financial planners like yourself get from clients and prospects all the time.
Yeah, I don't know if you can ever truly tell you're ready for retirement, but what I will tell you is virtually everyone who is retired they say go ahead and do it.
Okay. All right. So that's good advice for someone who's been retired. What do you think is the biggest warning sign that someone might not be ready for retirement?
The biggest warning sign about not ready for retirement, if you're talking financially, is generally speaking, if you want to retire in America, you need $500,000 or more saved up. Financially, though, because a lot of people are ready financially, they're just not ready kind of confidence-wise. And I found it's more around what's the confidence in the plan as opposed to, am I changing my identity? Is it the right time for me to retire? So I think if you go through and plan your retirement, you'll be a lot more ready to actually retire.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the money is one part of it. The emotional side is another, and a lot of people need to be prepared emotionally. What advice do you have for people to get emotionally prepared? We've had Fritz Gilbert on, by the way, who wrote the Retirement Manifesto, and he has a lot of advice around it. I'm curious for yours.
Yeah, I think the best way to get ready for retirement emotionally is to try it out. Uh, you can cut down part time. You can take a month off. I tell people that, and they say that's never happened. That's just not how we do things around here. I said, well, the power of asking. And every time they ask, their boss comes back to them and say, I need you around. Yes, I'll cut your hours down to 30 hours instead of 45. I will give you this extra 1 month or 2 month, even unpaid, to just take a break. They want to keep you around. And so try it out. If you don't like it, you've got a job to come back to. And if you do like it, who says you have to go back?
Yeah. All right, Jeremy, I want to get to the book, and what intrigued me about the book were the 5 steps that you outlined to help people at least create their master retirement plan. And the first step is around spending. And a lot of times, you mentioned in the book, it's not about like the budget. It's about figuring out how long you need to spend that money. What's your longevity? So what's the step in terms of figuring that out, which I think is one of the hardest things about retirement planning from my perspective.
Yeah, I go through the 5 steps. Step 1 is spending, which is a combination of how much, but mainly it's how long will you be in retirement? It's a math problem, and everyone focuses on the how much. They don't focus on the how long. The problem with thinking of how long you'll be in retirement is that a lot of people think of their life expectancy like it's death certainty. Like, oh, my life expectancy is 80. I'm not going to make it to 81. Like I'm going to die at age 80. If you run the numbers, you will die at your life expectancy less than 4% of the time. So you're pretty certain you will not die at your life expectancy. So go through and get the actual number. I reference a place called longevityillustrator.org, set up by the Society of Actuaries. It will tell you what your actual life expectancy is, because most people are wrong with that number to begin with. And it'll give you kind of the probability curve, because life expectancy is just the halfway point. Half the time you'll die before, half the time you'll die after, and you need to consider the correct number, but also what happens when you don't make it there or if you make it past there. That's how you have a good plan, is to consider the possibilities.
Yeah. I mean, generally, most financial planners I talk to recommend planning to age 90 or 95 as a general rule of thumb. Is in the absence of going to the Longevity Illustrator, would you just use those numbers as sort of a starting point?
Well, I've got kind of a beef to pick with financial advisors about that. And David Blanchett, who I'm sure you know, has done some research here where 90% of advisors put in either 90 or 95 as the number. And clearly, 90% of people are not dying at one of those two specific ages. It takes 5 minutes to go to a place like longevityillustrator.org and get your own personalized longevity estimate. It's wildly different whether you're a smoker or not smoker, if you're in great health or not great health, if you're male or female. What David Blanchett told me on my podcast was at the minimum, you've got a male female couple, you ought to at least put in, 90 and 88, just at least account for the difference of male female. And so what he was seeing is when you put in just 90 or 95, you're not personalizing it. You're just putting a generic number. And I think it's worth the 5 minutes to ask a few questions, understand what your own personalized longevity estimate is. It's your whole lifetime ahead of you. Take 5 minutes to get an accurate number.
Yeah, that's a small investment of time. So when I think about longevity and the ways in which you can manage and mitigate the risk of longevity of outliving your assets, maximizing your lifetime income, i.e., Social Security, is really important. But yet, only in your book, I think you mentioned only 4% of the people actually optimize their benefit. What should they be doing differently?
Yeah, so that was quoting a study that Dr. Larry Kotloff did, where he said 4% of couples actually had optimized their benefit, and the number is somewhere around $180,000 of lifetime benefits that you lost by not maximizing your Social Security. And I'm not going to tell you to everyone should file at age 70, but what I want to give you is a rubric of how should you approach your Social Security decision. Social Security, the official name for the program, is Old Age Survivor Insurance. If you approach this as if, how is this my decision? How's my decision going to help me when I'm in my old age? How is this going to help my survivor? And how is this insurance in case I live longer than I expect, or perhaps the market goes down or inflation goes up more than I expect? And if you quit with the break even calculators and trying to see what's my market return if I happen to take Social Security and invest it instead. Just focus on here's the decision I'm going to make with Social Security. How does it help me with my old age, my survivor, and how does it help as insurance as a backstop?
Yeah. Do you have a favorite calculator that you encourage people to use when they're thinking about like what they should consider doing in terms of optimizing their benefit?
I can't say that I have a favorite Social Security calculator because if you look at just Social Security itself, you are ignoring some things with taxes, with survivorship. Every calculator will give you an answer based on the inputs that you go into it. I personally use a planning software called Income Lab, and I'm a big fan of one thing that they do. It's kind of like a matrix of 62 to 70 for kind of both couples, right? So you get like an XY matrix. So that gives you 81 different combinations. And it'll tell you, based on when you file, how much income can you expect? Where maybe if you wait a few years to file, you'd expect a little bit more income overall. Yes, you waited to file, but the fact that you waited gave you more income then, which gives you a more ability to take some income now. That's a helpful chart. And what's interesting about that chart is you'll very quickly realize one Social Security benefit is more important than the other. Where, okay, if I wait 1 year for the higher, older benefit, it makes a huge difference. But if I wait 4 years for the lower benefit, younger spouse, it doesn't make a difference at all. And that's something kind of another rubric I encourage people to think of is just imagine you and your spouse are going to take it at exactly the same age. Just uh, just imagine the lower benefit spouse takes it 3 years earlier and the higher benefit spouse takes it 3 years later.
Hmm.
You've averaged out exactly the same, but what you've done now is you've given yourself as a couple the same income, but you've given that surviving spouse 24% more in income to that surviving spouse. Doesn't
Yeah.
affect the both of you, doesn't affect you. It really helps that surviving spouse.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I know many people don't do this, but I like to look at the net present value of those stream of benefits, and oftentimes it comes out to be 500,000, 750,000, $1 million, in even more in some cases for couples. Is that right?
Well, that's exactly it. And if you are trying to pick the next best stock and make a little bit more in your investment portfolio, you don't know if that's going to happen, but you can pretty well know the day I go file for Social Security, kind of the way that I file for it is going to add or subtract to my net present value. And why would you turn that down?
Yeah. So step number three, you sort of hinted at it already. You talked about taxes, and everyone's fond of saying it's not what you earn, it's what you keep, and that you recommend that readers ought to do Roth IRA conversions, but strategically. What does that mean?
Yeah, the goal of paying taxes in retirement is to pay the lowest amount of taxes over your lifetime, which is different than paying the lowest amount of taxes today. And what a lot of people don't realize, when you're working for 35 years, you get your W-2, you just give it to the tax person, kind of what it is what it is. But you hit retirement, you have way more control over your taxes. You can choose when to take money out, like December versus January, or before Social Security or after Social Security, and you get to choose which accounts to take money from, right? You get the bank accounts, brokerage accounts, traditional, and Roth accounts. Those are four different accounts, four different ways you can take the money out. And I'd encourage you to just be thoughtful of, when am I going to take the money out? Which accounts am I going to take money from? And quite commonly, if you're trying to lower your lifetime taxes, you'll be able to see there are certain years where I'm likely in a low tax bracket. Well, let's pay the taxes on purpose at that low tax rate to avoid the taxes later at a higher tax rate. And the best way to do that is with a Roth conversion, to just intentionally pay the taxes at a rate that you choose because you planned it out, so that you can avoid the taxes that are projected to be higher because you took the time to plan it out.
Mm. Jeremy, we have to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll talk about steps 4 and 5. So don't go away. Welcome back to Decoding Retirement. I'm speaking with Jeremy Keil, author of a new book called Retired Today. We were going through Jeremy's 5 steps to help you guarantee a more secure retirement. And Jeremy, we're on step 4, which has to do with investing during retirement. And oftentimes I know people, when they think about investing during retirement, they think about a declining equity glide path where they invest less and less in stocks and more in bonds. But you have a different take.
Yeah, really what you want to do when it comes to investing in retirement is determine, when do you need the money in retirement, and then just set up your investments to match that. You've been saving and working for years, kind of thinking, I've got growth market type investments, long-term type investments. And a lot of times, if that's your focus, you assume, I hit retirement, I totally only have short-term and income type investments. We mentioned earlier longevity. You retire at 62, there just might be one of you around 30 years from now. Imagine your 32-year-old self. What would you say to them? You would say, you got 30 years until retirement, invest for the long run. And so when you hit 60, 62, when you're retiring, you still have some long run type of money. It's just now you also have short run type of money, which is why I'm a big fan of the bucket strategy, where the money you know that you'll be planning to take out the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years, whatever you're comfortable with. Let's take that planned cash flow, that planned amount you're taking out of your accounts, and put it towards short-term type investments, allowing the rest of it to still stay towards the long term. And interesting enough, when you do combine likely waiting on Social Security, there's a lot of benefits that often are seen there, and setting up this short-term bucket. Well, you've got more money than towards conservative the day you retire. You hit Social Security, you don't need as much in the conservative area. So quite often you do see uh, the stocks can kind of keep on growing and rolling for you the longer you hit retirement.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the bucket approach for a lot of reasons. One, from a behavioral perspective, it allows you to sort of at least know that the money that you need to live on in the short term is there and is not subject to the whims of the market, to sequence of return risks, et cetera. I mean, do you find that your clients are just that much more comfortable knowing that there's money set aside for their living expenses that's not at risk?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I shared in the book a story, kind of a tale of two clients, where I met two different couples in the fall of 2019. One of them said, I'm retiring in a few years, but I want to get ready now. And based on that, we set aside some short-term money, kind of bucket type money, not because I was predicting the market up or down. It's just, this is what you're planning for. Let's set aside your cash flow. It's ready to go. The other one said, well, I'm retiring this next spring, 6 months from now. the market's doing well. I just want to let it ride for a little bit, 6 months. And I encourage him, like 6 months is not a long time frame. Let's make sure that you've got the money you want to take out in April of 2020 is set aside, not in the stock market. Well, you remember what happened in March of 2020 with the stock market dropping 30% total at one point. Well, I'll tell you, both of those clients, the one that was shooting for just a little bit extra and was planning on retiring that next April, he called me up in March and said, I can't retire April 1. My market money is down over 20%. The other one called me the same week. I was checking the records. It was the same week. The other one called me and said, can I even retire 3 years from now? And I got to show him, well, yes, you can, because you had already planned for this. You got your first 2 or 3 years worth of retirement money set aside out of the market. And that gave him the ability to feel like, I don't need to actually sell at a low point. Turned out the person that wanted to retire the following April, that spring, retired after the person who was going to retire 3 years down the road, because the person planning ahead 3 years from now had set aside, kind of bucketed some money. The behavior kind of results, like you said, were better.
Yeah, I think I recall back in the year 2000, many people retired at the market top, and then because they were relying on that money, had to go back to work shortly thereafter the market crashed, and perhaps they would have been better off had they sort of sloughed off a little bit of money for their 2 or 3 years worth of living expenses prior to the market top in the year 2000.
Yeah, right on.
So, so step five involves creating legacy protection. And in the book, you mentioned that some of the big three risks that people need to prepare for are the possibility of living too long, dying too soon, or getting too sick. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's a bit of what we talked about earlier. And it's amazing how everything kind of integrates together, where you might have gone through the 5 steps, got to this part and said, wait a second, did I account for maybe living too long with my decision around Social Security? Did I account for maybe not living long enough for my decision around whether I retire now or take that trip that I want to take now? So the big three risks to retirement are, if you live too long, you might run out of money. That's one thing people are worried about. But then there's also the opposite. If you die too soon, a couple of things might happen. You might harm your spouse, right? If you're married, you might harm your spouse, and that I died too soon. And these decisions around perhaps pensions or my mortgage debt or Social Security, really, we're not setting them up for a lifetime of not having me around. And you've got to just account for both sets of that. What if I live too long? What if I die too soon? And of course, if you do live longer, usually the longer you live, the worse your health gets and the higher healthcare costs become. And so you want to have a plan for how your health costs going to be affected way down the road. And part of how you leave behind is kind of how you leave behind your family. Did you do the planning ahead of time, kind of set up the documents ahead of time to make sure that life is easy for them? It's a tough emotional situation. Could you at least make the financial and legal parts a little bit easier? And
Yeah,
it's
I think
also protecting yourself. It's things like the powers of attorney to say, I might still be living and I need these protections to help me with my healthcare and financial decisions.
Yeah, I think in the book you talk about three other questions: where the care will take place, who will provide the care, and how the care will be paid for, which is seems like important questions to ask and answer.
Yeah, when it comes to long-term care planning, a lot of people ask me, should I buy long-term care insurance? And my answer is, I don't know, but you need to have a long-term care plan. And that care plan is exactly what you said. It's where do you want the care to take place? Do you want it to be in your home, going to some sort of healthcare facility? Who do you want it to provide that care? Are you relying on your kids because you took care of your parents or grandparents? I'd probably run it by them first. Or if that is a plan, does your house or their house have that ability to kind of have a mother-in-law suite kind of going on? And then how's it going to be paid for, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps it's paid for through some insurance. Perhaps you do what Christine Benz advocates in her book, How to Retire, which is to have a long-term care fund. It's kind of like if you've got $1.2 million invested for retirement, just plan on your income based off $1 million as an example. And the other 200,000 is kind of my long-term care fund, where maybe you didn't buy the insurance, but you've got a dedicated account or a dedicated kind of mental accounting even. This is where that money will come from.
Yeah. I want to go back to longevity and how you might manage and mitigate that risk. Obviously, Social Security is one way to do that. A pension might be another. Oftentimes, people suggest a income annuity or a QLAC or a deferred income annuity. I'm curious, what's your thought on people using those instruments to mitigate and manage the risk of outliving your assets?
Yeah, if you're worried about outliving your money, then having some sort of lifetime income is the way to, you know, protect against that. The stock market might do it, but it isn't guaranteed to do it. So I like to kind of look at things in reverse in a matter of uh, how much income do you need for your lifetime, and then where's it coming from? A lot of people say I'm worried about running out of money, but I've got this base amount. I just if I have less than 4,000 a month, then I'm sure things will not go well. I will not pay my bills. Then we look at it and say, well, between your Social Security, the two of you, and your pension, you've got 6,000 a month coming in. What's there to worry about? So the first question is, do you actually need something to provide that lifetime income that you aren't getting from Social Security or pension? And then see how much money you want to protect. I just had a lady who's a recent widow, and she had came to me because the advisor is basically telling her you should put half your money into an annuity. Her sister is a tax preparer, and the sister said, "This doesn't sound quite right." She set up a cash flow budget for this individual, and she only needed like $5,000 a month. Well, this income annuity would have provided 6,000 a month, and she's already getting, say, 2,000 a month from Social Security. There was no need there to put half the money in. But then when we talked it through, she was worried. This lady was worried about running out of money. And being a recent widow, she had lost about $1,500 a month in Social Security income. So my question then is, would you feel more comfortable if you had your own Social Security, but then something else coming in to provide that $1,500 a month that was going to your checking account and is no longer going into that checking account? And her answer was yes. And we went through and talked about all the different, risks and rewards, but that was the solution. What are you solving for? And she needed that safety amount of money. Then you find the annuity that helps you provide the best for that.
Jeremy, I'm afraid we've run out of time, but I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us today. I want to wish you good luck with your new book, Retire Today. And hopefully you'll come back on. We can talk about other chapters in the book.
I'd love to do that. Thanks, Bob.
So that wraps up this episode of Decoding Retirement. We hope we provided you with some actionable advice to help you plan for or live in retirement. And don't forget, you can listen to and subscribe to Decoding Retirement wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.